You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey vet rehabbers, if this is the first time you're listening to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast, welcome and thank you for taking the time to listen. Please click the subscribe button so you get notified every Wednesday when I release my next episode. To my longtime listeners, thank you for your continued support. I appreciate each and every one of you. Now, before we head over to the podcast, I want to say a quick thank you to Aisling Delaney from AD Animal Physiotherapy for the shout out about the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast on Instagram. Aisling, please email me at megan@onlinepethealth.com. I'd love to send you a limited edition veterinary rehabilitation mug. Now, if you have not joined our Facebook groups, please come and join us online. This is where all the vet rehabbers hang out. We share research, tips, and advice. It's a really great supportive community, and we'd love to have you online with us. We have 4 groups: the Small Animal Vet Rehabbers, Hydro Vet Rehabbers, Equine Vet Rehabbers, and our Business Vet Rehabbers. Now, this week, I talked to Ben Blecha from Go Hero Braces and Kiki Haeusler, a vet rehabber who has also just been awarded the fellowship for the IAVRPT. They have been doing some really interesting research on Stifle braces. They have some exciting findings which are answers to some of the questions that a lot of us have been having about braces. Before we head over to this interview, a quick word from our sponsors. Choosing the right therapy, laser, and PMF systems for your practice are big decisions, and that's why Response System has been helping to make that decision easier for over 35 years by offering both Class 3B and Class 4 lasers, as well as a full line of PMF products designed for both small animals and horses. All of our systems are fully rechargeable and adapted for international grids. You can find out more at responsesystems.com. So over to my chat with Ben and Kiki. Hey, Kiki and Ben, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I'm so excited to chat to you, and it's been amazing to get you both on because we're all in different time zones. Ben's actually traveling, so a huge thank you to Ben. I think he's at a hotel doing this recording, so thank you. But, I was at the IAVRPT conference in Cambridge, and it was awesome to have both Kiki and Ben there. And you actually did a presentation on this. After watching that presentation, that's where the idea came. And I went to Ben and I said, we should do a podcast. And he was like, yeah, we should get Kiki to come in and this is what we should talk about. So here we are. And you guys are together, working together, which is really awesome, and doing some research into bracing. So where did the idea come to start this research? Was it from you, Ben, or was it from you, Kiki? Or did you guys just one day we're just chatting and it sort of said this idea came up, we're going to do this?
I'll go for it. Yeah.
Well, actually, we're a much bigger team than just Ben and I. So Diane Messum's within the team, and Matthew Allen had to be part of the team because I talked him into, because he's at the University of Cambridge. And I said, well, look, we need to get some data on bracing. So I actually like Ben's kind of bracing and the idea behind him. And then I had to ask Di, because she's really good at, doing the casting, and she's real good at orthotics. And she actually put me in touch with Ben, to be honest.
Okay. And didn't you have someone who did all the stats? I recall that from the talk.
Yeah. We also had somebody for the stats because I'm more for the practical and the ideas and the maths and statistics. Yeah. We have Katja Zuna, which is in another project with me, and she's really good with numbers and statistics. So I'm really happy to have her on the team as well.
Okay, awesome. So do you want to tell us about the study?
Yeah, so basically the idea was to get sound dogs and test the braces on the sound dogs, which might sound a bit weird because a lot of the bracing studies that have been done, or a lot of the gait analysis studies that have been done, are on lame dogs and, what happens and what, how's weight bearing. But actually, since I'm a cruciate ligament patient myself, and I have a lot of braces on myself, I know the benefits and some of the disadvantages of bracing. And especially with dogs, it seems to be kind of challenging to get bracing to stay, or the brace to stay in place. And when they introduced me to when Di introduced me to that kind of bracing, I thought, yeah, let's try it on some working dogs. And she did actually manage to get working border collies in.
Yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, we obviously, when we're treating dogs with cranial cruciate ligament ruptures, like we know that they're compensating already. So we want to know, like, by using a brace, is that going to contribute more to changes in gait than the cruciate itself? So yeah, so basically you tested it on these sound dogs. How many dogs did you have? And I mean, what evaluation did you do to make sure that they were sound?
So what we did, they had to have their x-rays taken. So we have a vet on the team. So Mathiel did some of the testing, and so they had to be sound. And what we did is that we had them run on the treadmill before wearing the brace, while wearing the brace, and after wearing the brace. And we measured them while walking and while trotting.
Okay. And what were the changes that you found? So let's say, you obviously had a baseline for before. And then what were the changes that you found when they were wearing the brace and then after taking the brace off?
That was kind of awesome because, I collected the data and we looked at the data, and obviously I did some of my, basic statistics on it. And then I took it to the pro and I just sent her the data, and she came back to me and she said, I can't really find any changes. She was kind of disappointed. And I was like, yeah, that's good. And she's like, what do you mean? I mean, what's the point of not finding changes? Because a lot of times, we look for significant changes and whatever. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't want them to be totally different. Except from one part of the results, which I really liked, is that while they were trotting, they would put more weight on their hind legs and on both legs, not only the one where they were wearing the brace, but also on the other one. And it even sustained when we took off the brace. So wow. And in my assumption, that's what we have to, try to prove afterwards, because, doing a study is just before a study, I always say. I think there's some part of like proprioceptive mechanisms working in the dog. That's at least what I assume. I don't really know. So that's another thing that we need to prove.
Yeah, those are awesome results. And Ben, so, I mean, for you, obviously, as the manufacturer of these braces, this must have been like awesome to hear this. I mean, what does it mean for you as the manufacturer to know that this product basically doesn't change any gaits, and if anything, really helps the dog put more weight on both back legs?
Well, and that's a super important point, because there's so many people that the first thing they throw out there is that bracing causes weakness. Well, the point of this brace is to allow the normal range of motion, but limit the cranial drawer. And so you should be able to do both of those at the same time. And so if you're allowing that motion, you shouldn't be losing muscle mass. You should be able to gain it, because they can actually use the legs again. And so, yeah, that was huge. And I think that's really important to have that sound study to show that, because that's as big of a statement about bracing that we've had, that it's counter to what's been taught for the last 30 years. So
yeah. I mean, what are the other objections that you often hear from bracing?
Oh, I mean, I think a lot of people got into veterinary medicine and they maybe aren't as much with their hands, working with the braces, the hand skills. And so I think the casting is always the scary part to people. But what we found, we've actually started our courses where we're like teaching to cast without it being on an animal, and you can start to feel what the hook blade feels like, and then it's not as scary once you've worked with the animal. So
yeah, I mean, and is the scary part for them getting the casting wrong, or do you think it's just scary to work with the material? Yeah, and moving, and you have to cut it off. I mean, where do you think the scary part is?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many things. So we're a field of perfectionists, and so we don't.
Yeah.
When something's new, we don't want to mess up anything, and so where do we start? But like I don't know. There's a lot of people are just playing with the hook blade, but how many surgeons, you had to do surgery and working with the scalpel. You learned through that, but you had to do it a few times, right, before you felt comfortable holding that scalpel. And I think that's part of it. And yeah, it's just now being taught in schools, so it's more comfortable if you get more repetitions in school before you're out in practice too.
So you touched on a little bit of the biomechanics. Can you just explain to us in a little bit more detail the biomechanical benefits of a stifle brace for a dog that's got a cruciate rupture?
Well, you have to go back to like kind of the design of what we're starting with. Is what we're trying to do is we're trying to allow the range of motion in the stifle, but limit the cranial drawer or the tibial thrust. So obviously the thrust happens during weight bearing, and that's when we see the shift during gait. So Bertocchi did a study, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years ago now, but it showed that the thrust happens right in mid stance from 40 to 60% of stance. And so, but that's also our design behind the TPLO, is that we're not going to allow that shift during that time, but you can actually do the cranial drawer if you're just manipulating the animal. So that's where we kind of start with our design process. So in the brace, we want to be able to allow stifle motion, but we have this plastic in front that's going to limit this cranial drawer. If we just had the plastic here, it could just keep shifting. So we have to have a counter force pulling back. So if you think about how we line up with the stifle, if you're going to do a cranial drawer test, you're going to push behind the tibia and pull back on the femur. Well, we're trying to do the exact opposite in the brace, and we see that with the plastic in the front and plastic right on the distal point. Sometimes people look at the brace and they're like, hey, I think this should go way up higher, but let's keep in mind where we're trying to push. We're trying to push right behind the femur for that counterforce. If we bring that counterforce up to the mid shaft, it will just pivot around it. So it's important that we get that force as distal on the femur as that we can. And so that's the basis behind it, of the mechanics of it. There's some other studies. Budsberg and Torres did a study at Georgia that showed that we're having a little bit of shift in the stifle motion at mid stance, and that there was a little bit of a limited hawk motion. So we think that there might be some ground reaction force that's actually pushing back on the tibia as well. So that's kind of one theory of some of the mechanics of it. But then also with our design, it's different than others. This plastic is back behind the femur, and what we're finding is that, the hamstring line comes down here, but when the hamstring contracts, it gets thicker, and so that could be pulling that back, and just that push on that hamstring right at that point could be causing that to contract tighter and then actually pull that tibia back. So we have about 3 different modes that we think that it can be helping, and then just the proprioceptive feedback. So we haven't been able to split all those out, and it's tough to split those, which one's actually doing that work. But in the end, from a clinical standpoint, we want them to bear more even weight and more symmetrically. And Kiki has some exciting stuff about that we're finding in the cruciate deficient dogs. So I don't know if I talked in circles or if I gave an explanation.
That was perfect. I mean, obviously this study was done with your brace, which is different to other braces on the market. I mean, one thing which I think is unique about yours is a lot of them have that cushioning, right, in the inside of them. Yours doesn't. And I know this is because of, your experience, which is amazing, that you've had your own personal experience and how these things feel. So, I mean, you can't obviously extrapolate what they found now just to general bracing, right? It's obviously they've used your brace and yours is very different to others.
Yeah, I mean, most of the other designs look pretty similar. Mine has plastic in totally different places, and it's intentional for those forces that we're trying to put in. The what you're talking about is no padding. It's up in the thigh cuff. This is all hard plastic. It's nice and smooth, but this comes from my experience as an amputee. So I have a thigh cuff on my prosthesis, and I think I have 30 some years. I'm an amputee now, but early on we had a lot of padding and on that thigh cuff. What I found was when I try to be doing something athletic and start sweating, that padding, the coefficient of friction got really high. And so that would actually rub my leg and cause the wounds. And so by having something hard that water would just roll off, but it stays smooth during those, it would just, my leg would slide across it. And that's really more important in dogs, because what we found is, if you look at a dog's thigh, it's a cone. But when they walk, because of where their hamstring connects on their ischium and their tibia, and because they're in a crouch gait, that changes dramatically at the top, and it cycles back and forth. So what happens is that thigh section has to be able to slide and contour, because or slide in to where it fits the best as it goes through that cycle. And so when you have that high friction of that padding, that actually causes the wounds or the pain more so, or their change in gait. And so we're trying to free that part up, but still just apply that force behind the femur. And so we think we found a pretty good spot with that now.
Yeah, awesome. Kiki, if we go back to the study, are there any limitations that you want to discuss about the study?
Well, as usual in the veterinary field, we do have some limitations, which are, we have only 5 dogs in the study, sound dogs so far. But due to we have to brace them, or we have to cast them and then brace them and, get them in. That was a pretty good study to start off. But now what we do have to get is higher numbers of dogs that have a deficiency in their cruciate and have an ACL rupture that can't go under anesthesia, and we need to follow them up. Yes.
Yeah. So that's obviously the next step. Yeah.
That is the next step, and we're right into it. So I just shared some results with Ben, and I did share the results at the conference I just came from. I went to Croatia, and it was a conference on biomechanical engineering, and it was interdisciplinary. So we had medics there, we had veterinary field there. So that was quite interesting. And so we had one case in the clinic, and it worked out perfectly. So it's a very dedicated owner. So she would stick to our protocol, which we now use for other dogs as well. And it was a Bernese mountain dog, which can go under anesthesia for cardiac reasons. And so there had to be another opportunity for this dog not being as lame as it was. And we followed him up with a gait analysis system. We also did a before and after. So I have all the data. So I know what he looked like when he had his diagnosis. Then we measured him before we fitted the brace. We measured him immediately when we fitted the brace. And then we followed up twice, at least for the presentation now. And we have followed him up even further. And to my surprise, to be honest, after 4 months after his diagnosis, and it was about 2.5 months of wearing the brace, he's almost equal, or he is equal. I mean, his symmetry index is below 2% in the front and in the back, which I have to say, there's not only changes in the hind limbs, which we see when they have anything going on with the cruciate ligament, we also have changes throughout the body. And what we can show is that we limit the amount of pressure on the other hind leg, but we also limit the pressure on the front legs. And he turned out to be, just perfect. So he's wearing the brace for longer walks now. but he doesn't wear the brace all the time. So whenever the owner feels insecure or thinks this is a longer walk, she will use the brace, but it's not on him all the time. And we have some other dogs and we'll try to, or they're going to stick with that protocol of wearing it. And we will follow them up and hopefully we'll get the data, a lot of cases out there and then be able to share that. So this would be an opportunity for dogs that cannot go under surgery. But the other thing, what we also had in mind and we were discussing is what can we do for dogs so they wouldn't rupture the other side?
Yeah,
because we can
that's a big
see
problem.
that they are loading the other side very heavily. And since we saw in that first study with the sound dogs that we can kind of equalize it, and the same now with the dogs that have a deficiency, that might be an option for the other dogs, and that they might get bracing on the side that seems to be still sound, so they won't rupture that side and have surgery on the side that they have ruptured already.
So I actually had a case years and years ago now that I saw. It was a dog that had a TPLO. And what actually happened is it wasn't weight bearing post-operatively very well. There were a few complications and it didn't do so well surgically. And we actually got a brace for the other side. So we were worried about that exact thing happening. And so to put a brace on the other side to prevent contralateral cruciate rupturing. And then actually what happened was the dog was still not walking well on that operated leg. And probably about 4 or 5 months later, I was really lucky with this client because she was also just so dedicated. And, any recommendation that I made, she did. So then I said to her, well, let's get a brace for the operated side. Like, let's just put something on there. And she was like, okay, let's do that. And so we put a brace on both legs. And that's when we start to see the improvement. So it's interesting. Because in your studies, you had a brace on one leg and that helped to improve weight bearing on both the legs. So do you brace the one that's been operated or do you brace the other one to protect it?
So because I'm sometimes at the point where I get the cases that cannot have surgery, that's where we put it on the leg that has a deficiency and will need the bracing because it can't go under surgery, or the owner doesn't want the dog to go under surgery. We do have some cases where they had, some complications with surgeries. As you mentioned, sometimes things just don't go right, or they get an infection, or, that's just a common complication that could happen, and that's where we can help. Additionally, yes, that's true, and we have done that before. But so far, I think it's pretty interesting to get both of those cases and be able to offer an opportunity other than, not using the leg at all.
Yeah. So obviously the future studies that you're doing, you can't say, okay, we just kind of have border collies, because the first study you just used border collies, right? And now you're having to branch out. How is that going to affect your results looking at different breeds?
Actually, it was really good to have the working border collies because they are not used to wearing anything. They would have a hard time wearing the harness. We had to take off the harnesses while we were measuring them on the treadmill. So to have those dogs wear something on them and leave it on them is a pretty good result to use it on other dogs. I know if you look at the border collies, or especially the working border collies, they have a different shape than maybe a Bernese Mountain Dog. But still, since it's a custom-made brace, it'll work on any of the breeds that we see, other than the very short-legged. Is that like that, friend?
Yeah, it has to do with how much space you have on the medial side for the mechanical joint that we put in. So those short, humorous, 5-pound dogs, you can't really get the joint up in medially. So
yeah, but other than that, we should be able to use it on almost all of the dogs that that we can find and that we can brace and that we can assist with this kind of device.
Out of interest, the border collies, you must have had a time period where they had to acclimatize, right? Because as soon as you put the brace on, they were going to be like, hey, what is this? So how long was that period? And did you standardize that with all the dogs, or did all the dogs' acclimatization periods different?
Well, yes, as it's a study, they have to have a protocol of how to wear it and how long to wear it. And the owner needs to know how to put the brace on properly. So we do have a protocol, and that's what we also hand out to our clients now, that they have to get the dogs used to it. And you have a little sheet in the package when the brace gets handed to you. That's where it says what you have to look for, sore spots anywhere, anything that could rub. So we do hand the owners a protocol on how long to wear the brace in the beginning and how to start off, so the dog doesn't want to get rid of it and gets used to it in a proper manner.
And roughly how long was that period for them? Out of interest?
It was 2 weeks.
Okay.
And
wow.
I think that's pretty cool. If you think they cannot bear with a collar or a harness, and they would wear that device. And the owner, they really thought it was good to put it on them, and it was an easy way to put it on. There's not a lot of straps and things where you have to make sure that it's in the right spot. So, quite handy.
Ben, are there any studies that you're thinking of now, like for the future, any further studies that you'd want to have done to your products? It's always great when you make something and there's some clinical studies behind it, because you've obviously got all these thoughts of this is how it works. And so when there are great people like Kiki that are able to do the studies and prove your thoughts, what are the other things that you're questioning about your products?
Well, yeah, I think you already kind of talked about it. You already presented some good questions, like can we brace after surgery? Can we brace the sound side prophylactically? As soon as you answer one question, it usually comes from a study you have like 10 more. So anybody that's wanting to do research on it, like we try to support with the braces. Like, I don't get involved with how you're designing the study. I like to hear about it just so I can ponder some questions to you so you can make it better. But other than that, I want to know just as much as you do. So if there is anybody that wants to study more, most of the limitations is how do you measure it, right? How do you know if the force is coming from the floor, from behind I suppose there's some force sensors you could put inside the brace, but that's beyond most of what the people in our field are doing right now. But somebody out there knows, right? They have a cousin that owns a force plate some sort of company that can go into it. That's how it all works in our field, right?
That's why we go to conferences. I just heard something really good at the conference. So yeah.
Share with us. Tell us, what did you hear?
Actually, as I think all the three of us enjoy going to conferences. The one I went to, we had somebody from Harvard there, and he was talking about some sort of a light where near infrared light possibility to measure oxygenation in the muscles. So, wow. The EEGs is kind of hard, and you only have one spot, and sometimes invasive, and sometimes then you have to pick. And, that's where it keeps me, that's where I'm like, I need to get in touch. Because it's far away from what I could ever probably do, because it's Harvard and it's NASA and whatever, but who knows, If you don't ask them, if you don't try to do it, nobody might do it. Or, maybe they say, oh, well, dogs are going to be really good. We could do it. Who knows?
Yeah, I love it. Kiki, I think it was 2 years ago now. I can't remember. Was it 2 years ago that we created that working group for research at the Vet Rehab Summit? So is this something that people that are all over the world could potentially do at their clinics, or is it something that's restricted because of all the equipment that you need? I'm just trying to think, if we could get more data from, people that are doing this, because that's the problem, is to find all the cases. So that can not afford surgery and, are not a candidate for surgery, and then we're going to do the brace. They don't come often. So it must take you a long time to gather that information. Is there any way that vet rehabbers around the world could help you with this?
Well, sure. I mean, there's not just, as you know, I'm all about the gait analysis thing. That's one of my passions as well. So I'm able to look at multiple things there. But I think there are other ways to come up with ideas. It's kind of costly if you do gait analysis, but it's very helpful, and it's really easy to, work in a objective manner. So if there's more data out there where you can follow up with, any sort of objective way to look at the braces or forces, I'd be happy to, collaborate. So far, I sometimes have the feeling that people just don't trust themselves as much, that they think, well, I can't do it because of this, because of that. And, now I'm probably at the point in my career where I just push it, if it either happens or it doesn't. So I would just, tell people, just do it, just find a way how to measure it, and you can support our work, and to be shared with the whole community. So the research group, there's not much going on because people are just like, at least that's what I assume, that they are like, well, I don't really know what to do, or I don't have the money to do it, or whatever, kind of like this. And I think that's not the point. I mean, if you want to do it, you'll be able to do it if you really want to.
Got to find a way. I love the idea of doing research, but I don't think I've got the patience. It's hard work. And it's like, when I watch your presentation, I love watching people and their research, and I love learning about all the research that's happening. But when I look at that page, I think you're quite similar, Kiki, with the statistics, and there's just that like variances and all that stuff. Then I'm just like, whoa, no, I do not want to be sitting with all these figures trying to work this out. Like I'm all for somebody else doing it and sharing what they found with me and summarizing it all.
Yeah, I would say so. But, I got to the point where I found somebody who's really, really good at that. And, we have she had built a database, and so we're able to use that and to gather data. And if I need statistics, she's almost as crazy as I am. So I think you will find like-minded people. Even the two of you, each of us has their own craziness. And if you find a team that is crazy together, you will do great things.
Yeah, I've got to find my statistics person, that's for sure. Awesome. Ben and Kiki, thank you so much. It's been so amazing chatting to you, and I'm so excited about the research. And thank you, Ben, for always supporting research. Go Hero is just, it's amazing how much you support education and research projects. And so, we're really, really grateful to have people like you and companies like you that are supporting our profession. And Kiki, thanks for being the driving force behind questioning and asking all these questions and finding out the answers for us. We love it.
So Ben, I do have a last question.
Okay.
You've got Ben a question. Awesome.
Because we have another case, one of the study cases that will be in the cruciate deficiency group. So did you hear of our new case, and do you know, did the cast already arrive?
I don't.
Yeah.
I'm traveling, right?
Okay.
No, I have an awesome team back, like Trina, and she probably knows more about the design than I do at this point, and just interacting every day with troubleshooting for people and stuff like that. So I'm sure if it's not there, they're taking care of it quite well.
It's on its way to you, I'm sure. Knowing Ben and the Go Hero crowd. Yeah,
it's like with my team. That's kind of like my answer when I'm out, somewhere. I'm like, they know.
Yeah, well,
They've got it.
I'm so fortunate. I have an awesome team. I know you guys. Megan does too. So
I do.
You surround your. I think that's. Going back to your question about how you get through research. early on, just everything seems overwhelming, but you just start adding more and more people that get excited about their little thing, and as soon as you have your team, then it's
teamwork.
fun.
Yeah, that's it. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for your time. It's been great chatting.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers, eh? If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you get notified every time I load a new podcast. I'm here every week talking to vet rehab therapists from all over the world about all things vet rehab. For more information about continuing education for vet rehab therapists, you can go to Onlinepethealth.com. I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and of course, thank our sponsors, Response System. They are as passionate about therapy lasers and PEMF equipment as you are about veterinary rehabilitation. They would love to answer any questions you have, so please feel free to reach out to them at responsesystems.com, or you can email lisa@responsesystems.com.